Right, exactly. So if we've got my slides up there. So so I was asked to talk about something that's kind of very prescient to me, which is about how we cope in the digital world. We've been tackling about mental health, going through the premise that to be spiritually mature, we need to also be emotionally mature. And we started off looking at ourselves, and last week we looked at the fact about grief and loss, and Rachel talks about how we have to go backwards in order to go forwards, and that we've all got things that we need to grieve over. And this last week is really the last week of the first block of teaching, which is just kind of examining the present situation, where we find ourselves today, before we can start to move on about what we do about it in a more significant way. But this one is kind of really, really prescient, because it's something that we all deal with, the digital world that we all kind of like live in. So we got some slides, Joe? Or? Ding. Oh, that's all right. That's all right. I shall start. But first of all, a big question. Does Jesus have anything to say about this present condition of a digital world, our digital reality? I mean, the point is that we operate in this crazy, super speed, super-sized, 21st century, 24-hour, 365, 7 days a week lifestyle, which is so far removed. Oh, not bad. Shall I go back a bit? There we go. Which is so far removed from first century Palestine, which was an arable-based economy, which was had an itinerant rabbi lifestyle. That's the lifestyle that Jesus led. And so when Jesus came, he spoke directly into their condition, with its farming communities and its Roman occupation and its religion oppression. And yet his words and his teaching, and what I want to say tonight, and perhaps more importantly, his way of being, his lifestyle, also speaks directly into our present condition, to our cultural moment, if you like. So this is a little bit small, so I shall read it out for you. So this is from Matthew 11:25 to 30, and it's entitled Rest for the Weary. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. Okay, so I'm going to stop there, because straight away, clearly, Jesus is talking into the fact that I can't operate YouTube on a Sunday morning, but my kids can. Just literally look at that. Because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned, me, and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. That is absolutely speaking to me. I'm hooked, straight in. And then he goes on, all things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Hands up if you think our present condition has got something to do with the fact that we are all probably feeling weary and overburdened. Do we recognize that? Now, there's some brilliant books and teaching on this topic, and I've unashamedly ripped off 3 of them tonight, so I do need to give them a plug. So first of all, this is why I brought them up. Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scazzaro. Obviously brilliant. We've been kind of going through that one. John Mark Comer, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. This is amazing. Actually, everything that John Mark Comer does at the moment, he's a prophet for our age. Just absorb all of that, read that one. And then the last one is The Gospels, and this is by Matthew, by Mark, by Luke, and by John. They don't give their surnames. That's just so millennial. That's so hip. But seriously, it's brilliant. So John Mark Comer's central premise is that as a society, we are primarily focused on two main concerns. These two main concerns drive pretty much everything that society does. It is accumulation and achievement. We strive to succeed so that we can accumulate more stuff, and as we accumulate more, we reset our goals and our ambitions and our targets. And it's a never-ending cycle. And I honestly don't think that's a message or that plays true for those of us who are just starting our careers, or those of us who are embedded in jobs, or those people who are retired. I've never met a retired person. They are just as busy, and all those people are here this evening. So this is for everybody, this message. Our self-identity, our self-worth, our values can be found in the stuff we amass and the focus of our attention. And then the crazy thing is that the need, the drive for the accumulation and achievement results in hurry and distraction. And it leads to a busyness, a pace of life which is unparalleled in human history, and unprecedented levels of distraction away from things that are good for us to things that are probably not quite as good for us. The rate of progress in the digital world is extreme. Just think about it. In 50 years, think of what a car was like 50 years ago to what it's like now. Is it faster? Maybe a little bit. Compare that to your computer. So this is my computer. It sits in my pocket. It's my iPhone, but it is a computer. And let's compare the computer of my iPhone 11 with the Apollo 11. Probably the greatest achievement, the single biggest technological advancement of human history. We would hold it up as. My iPhone 11 has 100,000 times more processing power than the computers aboard the Apollo 11. My iPhone 11, just that, has 1 million times more memory than the computers that put that rocket into space and delivered men on the moon. My iPhone 11 has 7 million times in that more storage than was on the Apollo 11. That's incredible. That's powerful, and it's in your pocket. It's unbelievable progress. It's unbelievable rate of change. It's unbelievable power, but at what cost? So here's a little story. So last year on holiday, because I'm addicted to this, because my computer is my phone, I woke up, I scrolled down on my email, bing, this email came up. This is the genuine email. I just did this by way of proof, but obviously you can't see that. So I'll just highlight this. This was an email from my client, a building that I'm doing in India, in Mumbai, and they emailed me and I received it on a holiday, and these were 3 things that jumped out at me straight away. Number 1, we need to have, and then later on in the email, could you talk to your office and send out the following? Number 3, we can get in touch tomorrow. Now, immediately I was tense. Immediately I knew the only way that I could get rid of this feeling is to get something done so I could get back to my holiday. So I formed a plan. Unfortunately, this is where I was at the time when I got the email. I was in a burger bar in Cornwall, but they had Wi-Fi, so that was good. But I knew that the construction site was in Mumbai, and that was plus 5.5 hours in Greenwich Mean Time. But thankfully, I also know that we employ a drawing office for this precise reason in Vietnam, which is 7 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. And so I conducted my plan. This is what was going to happen, and this is what happened. On that morning, I was able to communicate with London. London was able to send me the work. I was able to sit down and do the work from my laptop using the Wi-Fi from the burger bar. I was then able to send the work all the way across the globe to Vietnam, where they were waiting for it, so that when I went to bed, they could work through the night, 24-hour working. Brilliant. And then the following morning, they could send it back to me. I could re-hook up at the burger bar, check the work, send it by my lunchtime that time so that the people in Mumbai, which are 5.5 hours ahead, would get it by the end of their day the following day. Brilliant. Solved. My client in Mumbai was happy. This is them opening up the building. Actually, the guys in Atlas, this is a genuine photo of the guys who do a lot of our drawings in Vietnam. This is them happy. And they should be. They did a fantastic job at short notice. They got more money for it. They did a brilliant job. Well done. And these are my kids. Now, obviously, I've mocked up that photograph. Obviously, I bribed them to do it. But you get the point, don't you? Now listen, there is no judgment here. I promise you. We all do it. And sometimes we have to do it. We do have responsibilities after all. But notice the original email. There was an expectation that I should do it because there was a knowledge that I could do it. They knew I could coordinate from where I was because of technology. They knew I was on holiday. We'd had a meeting a couple of days previous to when I went, and we'd wrapped up everything. And my out of office said I was on holiday. They knew that I could do it, and so they put that burden on me to do it. With great progress comes great potential, but sometimes at a great cost. The rate of change is new, but the struggle of a healthy relationship with technology, it really is not. As far back as 200 BC, people were complaining about new technology. I love this. This is from a playwright, a Roman playwright called Plutus in 2000 BC. And he says, "The gods confound the man who first found out how to distinguish hours. Confound him too, who in this place set up a sundial to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small portions." This is now my out of office. This is the message that people get. John Mark Comer points out in an amazing chapter in his book on the history of speed that most historians point to 1370 as the turning point in the West's relationship with time. The first public clock tower was erected in Cologne in Germany. And before that, the rhythm of life was dictated by the rhythm of the sun. The sun is under the control of God. The clock is under the control of the employer. And who throughout history has proven to be more demanding? Then in 1879, Edison came along and some of his mates with the electric light bulb. Before Edison, the average Westerner, and this was less than 150 years ago, slept on average 11 hours per night. 11 hours. Are you anywhere near 11 hours? No wonder we're all exhausted. In the 1960s, everyone predicted we'd all be working fewer hours. The US government predicted that in 1967, that by 1985, which is 35 years ago, the average citizen would only work 22 hours a week for 27 weeks in a year. They thought the problem was going to be we were going to have too much time and we wouldn't know what to do with it. Harvard Business Review conducted a study on the change in social status between work and leisure. It used to be that leisure was a sign of wealth. Now busyness is a sign of wealth. This is reflected in advertising, where they represent the good life. The good life is no longer sitting by your pool, sipping a martini. The good life is being on the 20th floor of a modern office building in New York, doing the deal. That's how they sell social status. It used to be the less you worked, the more status you had. Now it's flipped. The more you sit around and relax, the less status you have. The march of busyness has been paralleled with the growth of the internet. This is not an accident. In Nicholas Carr's Pulitzer Prize-nominated book, The Shallows, which looks at how the internet, what it's doing to our brains, he writes this: "What the net seems to be doing is chipping away my capacity for concentration and contemplation. Whether I'm online or not, my mind now expects to take in information the way the internet distributes it, in a swiftly moving stream of particles. Once I was a scuba diver in the sea of words. Now I zip along the surface like a guy on a jet ski." A recent study found that the average iPhone user touches their phone 2,617 times a day. That's the average user. That's me. That's probably most of you. In 2000, before this digital world came along, and this is frighteningly new because the iPhone only came into being in 2007, our average attention span was only 12 seconds. 12 seconds. In 20 years, it's now 8 seconds. A goldfish has 9 seconds attention span. But is it any wonder when you consider what we're up against? I don't know if people have seen the documentary A Social Dilemma on Netflix, which is so ironic because obviously Netflix is part of the problem, but never mind. It's a brilliant documentary, so I do recommend you see that. But it is scary. It's a bunch of ex-software engineers, presidents and developers, and they get together to explain their business model. So these are people that literally set up Facebook and Twitter and Snapchat and Pinterest and all of those social media platforms. And they explain how it all works, how they make money. They said, if you are not paying for the product, you are the product. We really need to let that sink in. If you are not paying for the product, you are the product. They don't sell data with this, they sell your time. This doesn't work for you. It's brilliant, don't get me wrong, it's absolutely brilliant. And without it, I would get lost. I wouldn't be able to find anything. But it doesn't work for me. It works for an industry that earns billions, if not trillions of pounds every year based upon harvesting our time. What happens is that they use persuasive technology to provide positive intermittent reinforcements. They're big words, but basically what they're trying to do is give you loads of little dopamine hits for as long as possible and to nudge you into spending more and more time on your phone so that time they can then sell to advertisers. A few examples are just incredible. You know that thing on a phone where you swipe down with your thumb and the screen kind of resists you a little bit, and then it pops up and the thing at the top flashes and there's a new update? It's the next score when you're following a football match, or it's the latest tweet, or it's the newest update on Facebook. That action of scrolling down and popping up is designed for your psychology. It is designed to simulate the actions of the responses from a Las Vegas slot machine. You pull down, you release, bing, a new little prize. Very subtle, but the reason to do it again. The reason to do it again. And these things are becoming incredibly sophisticated. They nudge you all the time. Last week, I'd been listening to Radio 4 at lunchtimes, and then without me telling it, by the end of the week, my phone had said, it's lunchtime. Do you fancy listening to Radio 4? It just came up. It knows. It's really, really scary. There are only two industries that call their customers users: illegal drugs and software. One engineer of Pinterest describes how he would come home and he would hide in the larder. He would hide there so he could use Pinterest, even though he had 2 young kids that wanted his attention and wanted his love. And even though he'd been working all day at Pinterest headquarters and knew all of the ways that they were trying to trick people to spend more and more time on their product. But of course, this is just distraction. What's it fundamentally doing in terms of how we see our sense of self-worth? There's one heartbreaking moment in the documentary when a young girl uses filters to beautify her self-image. She takes a selfie. She photoshops the selfie to what her idea of what beauty is, and then she uploads it onto her social media, and then almost immediately, she is reinforced with praise from her friends. Wow, you look beautiful. That's amazing. She's happy. But then one comes in which says, didn't you think about doing anything with your ears? And the next one is an emoji of an elephant. And she's crushed. We're not created to have social approval dosed to us every 5 seconds by hundreds, if not thousands of people, literally from around the world. As one former VP of growth, I've gone on to the pointer. There we go. As one former VP of growth for Facebook states, we curate our lives around these perceived senses of perfection before we get rewarded by these short-term signals, hearts, likes, thumbs up, and we conflate these with value and we conflate these with truth. In America, and presumably here, young girls in particular, self-harm and suicides are through the roof. Sociologists state that Generation Z, that's the one after the millennials, they are more anxious, they're more fragile, they're more depressed, and they're much less comfortable taking risks than any generation before. But of course, then if we even go out further, this is just on an individual level. What about a societal level? Have you ever seen a society which is becoming more and more polarized? Because we are fed the news and the information and the truth that accords with our likes and our dislikes, so that we will stay there longer. In America, if you type in on Google, climate change is, then depending where you are, the predictive text that will come up will either say the biggest hoax in the world, that will be its first suggestion, or it will say the biggest threat to humanity in the world. Depending on where you are fed a reinforcement of your truth. And then we wonder why the people on the other side of the argument don't get it, because surely they have all of the access to all this information as well. Well, no, because they're getting different information. This is incredibly scary and incredibly powerful stuff, and it's so confusing because it's simultaneous utopia and dystopia. It's brilliant and it's bonkers. But the emotional toil is clear. We're more irritable. I am more irritable. Hypersensitive, restless, busy, emotionally numb. I struggle to prioritize. I desire to escape. I fail to look after my body. I feel isolated. John Mark Comer poses the really awkward question then. What is all this distraction, addiction, and pace of life doing to our souls? So back to the passage on Jesus. Jesus was speaking directly into a situation of a people group who were carrying a very heavy burden. First century Jewish life was hard. it was tough. You had a harsh, arable farming life. You lived under Roman occupation, and you were told that the only way to get through this is to bear it all under strict religious laws. Now, a yoke, of course, is a wooden crosspiece that is fastened over the necks of two animals and attached to the plough or a cart so that they can pull it along. But it was also a common metaphor in Jesus' day to describe a rabbi's way of reading and interpreting the Torah, the ancient Hebrew Bible. And Jesus was a rabbi. He was a teacher with followers. So they would have understood his reference on two levels. One, that a yoke is his interpretation of the Torah, his way of doing life. And Jesus here is recognizing that life is tough. Notice he doesn't say it's an easy life. No, he has an easy yoke. The yoke isn't the life of Jesus. Jesus didn't have an easy life. It's the lifestyle of Jesus. So the yoke isn't a promise. Jesus isn't pointing to something in the future, a not yet, something to grab hold of as hope. No, it's much more immediate than that. Physically, a yoke is also a tool. It's a first century piece of tech designed to carry a weight, to bear a burden, for doing work, for completing a task. It's not too different to how we were sold these. A piece of tech designed to help us navigate, complete tasks, carry a burden, and get through life. I quite like the idea of first century farmers talking about their yokes as if they were iPhones. I like your yoke 10 there. Are you gonna upgrade that to the yoke 11? No, I've got a few more yards left on the contract. I really like the look of the yoke 12 though, coming out. It does sound a bit like an iPhone. Or at least what the iPhone promises to be, something to help you diarize, socialize, organize your life, a tool for living, designed to help us with the daily grind, the burdens of life. But let me ask you, is that an easy yoke? Or does it demand to be opened on holiday and spend the best part of the day not with your kids but dealing with work? Does it demand to be touched over 2,000 times a day? Arguably, this is one of the most powerful tools in the modern world, but it's one hell of a difficult yoke. And you will find rest in your souls, Jesus said. Apple never claim this, do they? Tim Cook, when he's standing, the CEO of Apple, and he's standing in front of those impressively huge screens with all of the specification and standards of the latest new upgrade or the latest new iPhone, he never says, and this will provide rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, Jesus said. Kind of makes sense. It fits. We were created by a creator God. So it makes sense that the way of his son, the lifestyle to which we should adopt, naturally fits the shoulders for which they were created. But not only this, the clear implication of the text is that this is a double yoke. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Jesus isn't saying these are my rules, do them. Jesus is saying, do as I do. You see, we have someone to follow, and crucially, someone who will journey with us. And a right and fruitful way of life to follow, and someone to ease the burden and jointly carry the load. And my burden is light. Now, hang on a second there, Jesus. See, I've read the Gospels, and in the Sermon on the Mount, there's some pretty tough teaching there. And yet, what if practicing the ways of Jesus was actually the path to a maturity which could be described as being both emotionally healthy and spiritually alive? Can we agree that Jesus was emotionally healthy and spiritually alive? Isaiah 55, verse 1. Come, all you who are thirsty, come to the waters. And you who have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without cost. Why spend money on what is not bread and your labor day on what does not satisfy? Listen to me and eat what is good, and your souls will delight in the richest of fare. Give ear and come to me. Hear me, that your soul may live. Could it be that the way of Jesus is actually the way to experience life in our souls in the deepest, most profound sense? John Mark Comer and Peter Scazzaro, and building on the work of people like Dallas Willard and Richard Foster and people before them, they've reignited a call to practice ancient disciplines, the ancient ways of Jesus, spiritual disciplines that have been reimagined to tackle the ills and chaos of the modern digital world. And the good news is that we're going to get into some of those in the coming weeks. We've done a lot of assessment, but these are brilliant things. But they're challenging. And they really do feel odd when you try them, because they're so countercultural. But they are so fruitful. They are good and they are life-giving. But I can't really leave tonight after giving you a kind of like a frightening summary of the state we're in with all this stuff without at least pointing to an antidote for the busy life. And just as we've done that, a WhatsApp message has just come on. Brilliant. Oh, there's another one. Number one, recognize the issue. This is not an iPhone. It is a digital yoke. It is a tool for doing life, and it is not an easy one. In fact, for some of us, it has gone beyond that because we pour so much of ourselves into it. It has become an idol from which we derive our self-worth, our values, and our truth. Number two, restrict. I'm not saying throw them all away. I wish I could. But put up healthy boundaries. Let's have a talk and a conversation about those boundaries. They will be different for different people. Budget your time. Your time is the product, what they're after. You budget everything else. We do. We budget our money. Why not budget the time you spend on this thing? Because the time that you spend on this thing is the thing that is being traded throughout the world. But for some, just budgeting time isn't enough. For some, it is an addiction from which we need help, from which we need prayer, and from which we need support. Number three, replace. Remember the words in Isaiah. Why spend money on what is not bread and your labor on what does not satisfy? Listen to me and eat what is good, and your soul will delight in the richest of fare. Let's replace the time and focus with richer fare. So how do we do that? Again, in the ruthless elimination of hurry, there's 4 spiritual disciplines that John Mark Comer looks at that I think are particularly pertinent for our digital world. And we are going to get into those in a lot more detail, and I've spent too much time talking already tonight. Except, I will just touch on one of them, slowing down, because I think silence and solitude and Sabbath and simplicity we hear quite a lot about. But slowing down is also a practice of Jesus. All of these are practices of Jesus. Jesus led an incredibly fulfilled, from the outside, apparently busy life, at least the 3 years that we're largely told about. But notice he was always present. Think of the story of Jairus' daughter. So the scene is that Jairus' daughter is ill and she is on the brink of death. And the disciples are racing to get Jesus there so that he can heal her. It is 999. It is an emergency. It is flashing blue lights. It is hurry, hurry, hurry. It is full speed. And yet, as he's going, he feels a touch in the crowd from what probably most people would say was an insignificant person. Now, what does Jesus do? He stops. He is aware. He is present. He doesn't allow to be hurried, but he deals with the there and the then for this lady who's been bleeding for 12 years and heals her. Now, when I'm busy, I'm distracted. I'm not aware. I'm focused. And I'm isolated. When Jesus appears to be busy, he is also incredibly present in the moment and present to the Spirit. These are all practices of Jesus, and we're going to deep dive into them in later weeks. But in truth, these are all practices in the discipline of abiding, which is resting in God. Or as a 17th century French friar, Brother Lawrence, puts it, practicing the presence of God. That's so good. Practicing the presence of God. Just finally going back to our original verse in Matthew, and the middle section in particular. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Surely then it follows suit that if we want to practice the presence of God, we do this through practicing the way of his Son. Say that again. If we want to practice the presence of God, we do this through practicing the way of Jesus. There is so much more to be said, but I've been talking for a long time. So let's wrap it up there. It's an incredibly tough, burdensome world, and especially at the moment. But the tools that we're sold for helping to get through life, the yokes to help us carry the burden, the digital yokes, are not easy compared to the way of Jesus. And beyond this, he promises to journey with us through this. Father God, help us to tackle the chaos of the modern world through the example of your Son, our Lord and Saviour Jesus. With guidance, comfort, and wisdom as gifts given to us from the Holy Spirit, into your loving, healing, restful embrace. Amen.